Going forward, I have empowered our prosecutors to charge and pursue the most serious offense, as I believe the law requires.
I'm glad to see our Attorney General is cracking down on one of our country's biggest issues, mass incarceration, by working to incarcerate millions more. Now, last week, Jeff Sessions told federal prosecutors to charge suspects with the most serious and provable offenses, instructing them to pursue mandatory minimum sentencing. Sessions says that this new directive will help achieve just and consistent results. But what are mandatory minimum sentences anyway? I'm Hannah Cranston, and I'm about to lock down any questions you may have about mandatory minimums because the people advocating for them don't seem to understand them either.
Mandatory minimums ensure that the right sentences are going to equate to the level of violator that we are going after.
Yeah, well, basically, mandatory minimum sentences say that regardless of the individual, the circumstances, the severity of the crime, or even a judge's discretion, arguably what they're paid to do, judges are required to issue a predetermined sentence, and no less, to those who commit certain crimes.
That wasn't the right thing to do, and the system forced me to do it.
Now, just like there's no such thing as one size fits all when you're trying on clothes, ladies, you know what I'm talking about. This uniform approach definitely doesn't fit when it comes to the law either. Mandatory minimum sentences are most common in cases involving possession of crack or heroin, or even enough pot that a prosecutor could argue you had the intention to sell. Now, a judge is then required to sentence you to a minimum of a few years in prison, with the potential for a life sentence if you are a repeat offender, aka that whole 3-strike rule you've probably heard about. So you could get a life sentence for a non-violent crime if you get caught selling pot 3 times. Whoever came up with this had to be smoking something. But the real problem with mandatory minimum sentencing is not just the number of years it steals from people's lives. It's that, one, judges say these laws suck and take away their ability to apply fair sentences based on all the facts. 2, research by the U.S. Sentencing Commission shows that the certainty of punishment, not the severity or length, is the best tool to stop crime. So adding on years of prison time isn't even effective. And 3, these laws disproportionately affect low-income people of color. Blacks are almost 5 times more likely to be convicted for drug possession than whites. So of course they must be 5 times more likely to possess drugs, right? You must be high if you think that is even close to being true. Surveys show that whites use drugs more than blacks, and in fact most illegal drug users and dealers are white. Now, how does that make sense when 3/4 of those incarcerated for drug-related offenses are Black and Hispanic? People of color are disproportionately targeted at every step of the process, a process that is flawed and biased as is. We already incarcerate more people than any other country in the world. And by reinforcing mandatory minimums, laws that former Attorney General Eric Holder, former President Obama, and many states have tried to reform and ease up on, we are literally sentencing millions of people to unnecessary years behind bars with consequences that extend beyond the cell. Tearing away a parent from their family or a young adult away from schooling for possession of an illicit drug tears apart communities and creates a cycle of poverty and violence. Violence that is not a quick fix and a long sentence away from being quelled. So while Jeff Sessions may think he's being tough on crime, he is actually just creating more crime. When you put people in prison for years on end, removed from society and in harsh conditions, you actually increase the chance of recidivism, aka the chance they'll commit another crime. Prison fucks these people up more and actually worsens the problem. Now, the solution lies in intervention and education, which is actually a more sustainable and cheaper solution than throwing the first poor person of color we find trying to put food on the table by selling a little weed into the slammer. When the US is spending $80 billion on funding for prisons and jails, with nearly 50% of prisoners locked up on some type of drug offense, we are f***ing our people and our paychecks. So if you can't care about how unethical and unfair these policies are, I'm sure you can find it somewhere in your heart to care about the exorbitant taxes you're paying for Jeff Sessions' war on drugs that actually has no impact on drug use or drug offenses, just gives him a vessel to fulfill his Jim Crow era wet dreams. Thanks for watching TYT. Share this video and do the bare minimum by following me at Hannah Cranston.